here. So we're in a circle. There's a forum panel here that we'll start with and kind of guide the direction of the conversation. But the hope is that as we have some opening here, that as well, that the group please come in and participate and feel like this is one large panel with helping kick things off. And there's quite a bit of experience that's in this room, also that's been selected up here as a starting point, where there's many that are seeking out and to be part of a community, to be communing with sacrament in a responsible way, and to find the people. And there's a lot of things that we're learning about. How do we do this right? How do we do it in an efficacious way? How do we deal with the legality? How do we deal with finance? How do we deal with just organizational structure? And maybe even like collaboration between each other? How do we get involved with advocacy? Ethics, a huge question. Yes, sir.
Excuse me, actually, just for who's in the room, could I see a hand of who is actually interested in starting a church or being actively involved, just so I get a little sense of what the interest is in the room. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
What can you clarify what you mean by actively involved? What is it? What
are you suggesting? That makes it too big, I guess. Just might want to be a part of a collective or cooperative effort to start a church or a spiritual group.
So who wants to start something? Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll share a little bit of my personal story that brought me to MAPS in Denver last summer, and was with Eric. I walked up to the conference center. Sandy was there as well, and Eric was talking to the cops up front. You can tell us maybe if you want to later about your state, but Eric was greeting the police and telling them about how he was feeling about our rights and Denver. And part of that was with decrim on the state level and the advocacy that had been taking place and what's changed, but also his right as a church minister to be able to talk to the police up front and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. It's changed my life. It's helped me, and I'm seeing it work with others, with many others, all throughout the nation. And I've been blessed in exploring that process myself, but to turn that individual practice and working with others into becoming more public and being out in the world. I've chosen to go to the state capitol in Maine and testify to legislators and senators, and to be here and testify in Portland, be part of the decrim process, and be one of those people to testify, but also be one of the few people to testify to say, hey, mushrooms are working. It's not just over there in some study, but I'm seeing it experientially through me and with others in my own life. So I came from complex PTSD as a combat veteran, worked for the U.S. Department of State for years in Russia, Jordan, and Cyprus, a lot of paranoia, deep trauma that took me about 15 plus years to work through, and this sacrament has really helped me. And finding church community, being part of church community, to me is seeking out to be part of the very thing that I wish to be involved with, because I know that I need it for the stability of my own being. I'm not wanting to slip back into where I've been before, and the desire to give back in ways that I've been blessed to receive, those that have been helping me in different spiritual communities, but didn't have the psychedelic mushroom community that I really wanted to have. It was always just me and a guide, me and a shaman of some form. And so when Eric and I went to a workshop, it was a workshop with Allison Hoots. If you were to look up some attorneys in the space, Allison Hoots and Sean McAllister, they were part of writing the Best Practices book. If you haven't read that PDF online, which is free, highly recommend it. If you're thinking of starting a church or being involved with the church, and that is kind of the synthesis from what they had found of doing an analysis of the field. They were funded by Chacruna Institute, which is a native-based organization, nonprofit, that is working embedded within the psychedelic space. So we can be grounded and connected to our native peoples and find ways of reciprocity, and then also find ways to bring more efficacy in for things like churches. So that document is pretty big. That was this workshop. It was like, in half a day, how do we bring that together, hone that in, bring it together? And so there's some learnings there, And outside of that, conversations with lawyers that many of us have had about how do we do this? And then what we're discovering in real time, like what is working, what is not working, will kind of be part of this discussion today. And we can go in many places. My invitation is that we can kind of get bogged down in some things like, everything from misappropriation, harm reduction, to things like envisioning, like what is the full potential of what a community could look like as we're in service? What is like the redefinition of spiritual community, church, and its transformation in the world outside of itself? How do we be part of maybe eliminating homelessness in a community? How is it that these churches can be part of maybe helping to, the opioid epidemic can make a reverse turn due to our existence? And maybe there's many other different roles that we could play. And the envisioning I found from my work in systemic change, particularly as a social entrepreneur, is that the more we envision as a collective and the more will we can generate and the deepening of caring we can have of the practical potential and the challenges of our communities, then the more can come about, the more we can create together versus being stuck with, oh, what's wrong? That person did this and that. So consider when we're in reflection, and if we have a choice for focusing our energy as a group, what are we investing into? Maybe kind of just observe in your own consciousness how your body is, and then maybe where are we choosing to think? Where are we choosing to ask questions around? Recognizing each question is like magic. We are manifesting some new life. So where are we choosing to orient that consciousness? So that's just a little bit of the context, my invitation today, but we'll go wherever we want to go. It's up to us, okay? Let's start off. Sandy, could you share, and each of us go along and share a little bit about ourselves, what we're doing in the space, maybe when you established the church, how it's been going, where you see your church going, and then maybe what are some of the things you're thinking about as a team about what are you confronting, what do you need to overcome, and then what could the church become? And so that will maybe give us some good material for us to think about what are the questions that we have around that direction. And maybe we'll find some commonalities among how we're processing that emergence of these communities. And final piece about me. So Psanctuary, Courtney and Eric and Tina were co-founders of years ago. And then as I was on my journey, it's like, what do I do with the mushroom church? How do I start a mushroom church? A year and a half ago or so, myself, Elena, and a few others sat in that lounge Delta out there. We were on some mushrooms, and we were envisioning what is we? What would a cooperative, decentralized church look like? And how do we do it in integrity with being connected to the sacrament and of the sacrament, and find a way to weave together and find a way to support each other, maybe with some organization around some of the back end stuff, where each of us more ministers can be doing work out in the world, but come back together. What could that model be? Going through Eric and Courtney's practice, through the programs, along with some other things I've done in my life, I felt like this is efficacious in integrity, and there's a sincerity and depth to it that can weave with them. And so what's happening in Maine is this emergence of this sense of Sanctuary Maine community. The people are part of Sanctuary that are in Maine. And so we're exploring, what does that mean? What happens at a national level and a local level? All the things, how does that meet and connect together? So that's what's brought us where we are today. So Maine Fungi Fest is a bit of kind of a coming out of the closet of who are we? And we're trying to understand ourselves. We don't have an answer yet, but we have an orientation of where we're going. So I'll leave out the challenges and things that we're dealing with maybe after we've gone around together. So Sandy, thank you.
Yeah, so where do I begin? So I love the idea of spelling. Your words cast spells and what church can be. And us as Americans, this is one of our last freedoms, the freedom of religion. And I never really grew up with a church. And in fact, I felt, for one thing, I associated them with death, with funerals that I found really scary. I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't understand what was going on. I did not feel safe in my own body. I felt like I was going to actually spontaneously combust like the Wicked Witch of the West or something. Like I just did not understand it. And I was really jealous, kind of my friends when I would sleep at their house on Saturday night and I had to go on Sunday morning to Sunday school with them and see what their church was like. And I'd see people greeting each other and hugging and kissing and missing each other and loving. And I was like, okay, so it's not just about that creepy guy that's up there saying a bunch of stuff that I don't understand, but I see this community. And that was something that I did not have or see growing up. So as I do have children and my husband is a nurse and he is a DJ, what church is to me, or where I have found some of my profound healing to happen, and some of the most religious experiences of my life have happened on a dance floor. In fact, I met my husband on a dance floor. And my grandparents met because of dancing, and they used to dance in front of the Christmas tree and glide. And so I said to myself, you know, Stanley over there, he actually filed the paperwork for me in 2019 because we had turned our four-wheeler shed into a chapel to get married in front of and have a ring blessing ceremony and start having ceremonies that meant something to me, as I did not feel welcome and nor could I get married in a Catholic church, although my husband is Catholic or was baptized Catholic and went to Catholic school for 8 years. But however, I was also denied being a godmother in the Catholic church when I was supposed to be because I had not received the communion or whatever. So once again, I felt unsafe, I felt left out, and I wanted to create a system and a church where I would have safe and sacred spaces for people to be free to ask questions about their consciousness, about raising the vibration and energy, and where we could not vibrate in the frequency of shame and fear and guilt, but instead of abundance and peace. And what could that look like, right? So again, the music frequency, the energy that comes from the vinyl record. So the sacrament for us is music. And that is expressed when the needle hits the record. So our services happen every Saturday. It's called Soul Saturday. The tagline is spinning vinyl for the masses, because this is our mass. I have elevated DJs to the status of reverence, and we allow them to speak through the music to the congregation to raise the vibration, and we come together and we dance and we network. And we say, how was your week? And we unpack. And we talk about the future. We've had almost 500 events in 3.5 years. We have 4 days a week of programming. With the money that we raise, we have free sound healing, free breath work, free yoga, free meditation, support groups that are by the members for the members. So the church has evolved, you see, because as people join, it's like, what do they want to see and what do they want to share? So plant medicine is actually quite a small part of, like, it's another way to raise the vibration, and it has an amazing role in a lot of our members' lives. And a lot of our members are really there for the music. So music is my sacrament. And dancing is my expression to the divine and how I connect. So that's what my church and what I see for our community is like, our community. So the spaces are everything. Having a place to go where you feel safe, because again, I didn't experience that as a child, so I wanted to create that for my kids. Thank you.
Does anybody ask if is it possible to maybe add upon that where you see the church going, and maybe if you've had any challenges along the way, what those have been?
So where I see the church going is I have a dream to become a tree so that my grandkids can climb on me. So I want to utilize my ability as a church to create a cemetery that will be a living forest cemetery that will be our composted human bodies, and a nature conservatory for the animals. So I am working hard to procure this land, which will be 70 acres, which I intend to have be partly the cemetery, but also our healing retreat center. So essentially where we can have bigger concerts and fundraisers to raise the vibration for more people and to attract more people who are limited access with, you know, plant medicine and healing modalities. Like, there's not a lot of yoga studios out in the woods. There's not a lot of, I didn't grow up knowing what Reiki was. I didn't, there's a lot of things I didn't know about. So I think where I would like to go is getting some of those city folks out of the city, back into nature, appreciating Mother Earth, and then being part of the pollution solution by using our status as a church to create a cemetery, so that I can see this vision come to light of not taking from Mother Earth when we die. And reshaping what those funerals that used to creep us out, like, make them really a celebration of life. So I'm really interested in how we can change the dynamic of the end of life care and how we lay each other to rest. So that's where I see us going.
And the challenges to get there.
The challenges to get there is that it's not legal in all states to be composted. For some reason, it's quite controversial. Other challenges is I'm going to need to speak with an arborist. Like each tree is going to need a certain amount of square footage, right? So how do I design this and price it out? Other challenges are going to be the biases and the stigma associated with me even calling myself a church and how that's going to be received by the town and the community in which I would like to build this. The other challenges are we do have cannabis as one of our sacraments, and the neighbors upstairs have been complaining lately about our sacrament and the smell of our community. So that's been a challenge, and the sound of the music, and so trying to be a good neighbor has been a challenge, which is why we are seeking a space in nature with more privacy, because healing is loud, especially if it involves DJs and plant medicine. You might be howling at the moon or having full body orgasms in the lake, who knows, but so yeah, it's a lot. But building community has a lot of challenges, dealing with personality issues and problems arise, and it's not like you have a built-in HR department. So we're learning as we go, and I'm grateful for everybody who shows up, because we just share with each other. And again, it's evolving, it changes. We change the bylaws. We have the right to write our own laws. That's what I think is really amazing about a church. Have your own doctrine instead of beliefs. So I made single-use plastic officially against our religion on 420 because somebody opened up a veggie platter that was attached to broccoli, and the entire church smelled like farts. So I literally wrote a bylaw that said single-use plastic is now forbidden in our safe and sacred spaces. So it was fun. Like it's almost fun to, again, it's creative, right? Like we're looking at these kind of a patriarchal structure. When I started my church, I actually hired a consultant that set up Baptist churches in the South. And I had this amazing woman just consult with me because it wasn't really about being able to just use plant medicine. It was about how do I write bylaws? How do I have high commandments, or, kind of mimicking what the Catholic Church structure is? Because again, I didn't really know in 2019 how else to do it. And then the pandemic just happened to happen. Like we filed paperwork in 2019, pandemic happens. So that gave me a lot of time to think. So again, it was kind of fun. It was a creative endeavor. I had no lawyer. I never hired a lawyer. I've had one consultant, and I worked for a lawyer for 8 years in my 20s, so I can speak like a lawyer. And I do advocacy in the court system lately for juveniles, and I can stand up as spiritual counsel, and you get respect in the system, which I really enjoy as, a clergy woman in business. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, Christina here from Sacred Psanctuary. We are in Salisbury, Massachusetts. I think I already said that. And we were founded in 2021, so we are relatively new. We've been at this for 3 years. And I guess I'll just tell you a little bit about my story and how we came to be. So I used to work in film and entertainment in Los Angeles, and having a thriving career, but living in my darkest of days. So very intoxicated, living a very unhealthy lifestyle. And I ended up sitting with ayahuasca unexpectedly while working on a project, which flipped my entire world upside down. And I walked away from my career of 12 years and moved back to the East Coast, got certified as an herbalist, and decided that I wanted to help people. So I was very much in that process of grounding into my spirituality. And during that time, I was hit with a really awful tragedy. I lost my brother. And it was in a way where him and I were in a fight when it happened. And so the trauma that occurred in me was very serious. And I started to spiral down again. It's making me a little emotional. And it was that experience of losing my brother that caused me to go and sit with the mushroom for the first time. And I wasn't perfectly healed in that experience, but it certainly opened me up and allowed me to look at that grief, which I did not want to look at. I wanted to stuff it away and ignore it. So it opened me up. I could hear nature breathing and witnessed my aura in a mirror and saw the light and thought, I need to do something with this. So I did. I started going on many journeys and started to learn the mushroom and what it had to offer. And every time I would go in, another layer would get peeled back. And so you start with the surface traumas. For me, it was my brother passed, but then I start going deeper and deeper into my entire life. And to be honest with you, I'm still in that process, right? We're human. I'm very much human, and I'm very much still working through things because there's constantly stuff that comes up. As we're navigating this life, we may think we're completely healed. Something will continue to come up. And so that process of exploration after my brother passed ultimately led me to Spirit and to God. And it is my relationship with Spirit and God, the mushroom being the bridge to that relationship, that allows me to do the work that I do and inspired me to open up Sacred Earth Sanctuary so that we could help others to heal through those layers and find their way into Spirit. And so some of the challenges, even though we've been doing this for 3 years, we've had issues financially sometimes. It's hard to find that balance of, you're holding space. It's a lot of energy going into holding space. And at least for me, it's like I can only hold that space so many times per month. So I have to charge X amount to make sure that the church still has its roof. And it creates this just interesting area of like, what's appropriate to charge? How do we keep the roof, over our heads without overcharging, right? Because we want everyone to be able to have this experience. So as of late, we're trying to offer, payment plans and such, but it's definitely a conversation I would like to possibly get into if that feels good. And in terms of a future for us, we did just move. We were in Amesbury, Massachusetts, so we've only been in our new space for a few weeks now, but we have a yard, so we're raising money to get a tent, not unlike what Yeshua has, so that we can have our ceremonies outside, because I've been holding space out of my home, which is a lot of energy flying around, and that's where a lot of that exhaustion comes in as well. So that's sort of where we're at. We're still evolving, but very grateful to be here. Thank you for listening.
Good to have you, Christina. Thank you.
Well, I can speak. I don't have a church, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself, and then some questions that I've been sort of simmering on the past few days in relation to this idea of mushroom churches. But I come from a very academic background. I would never in a million years imagine that I would gone to chaplaincy school to become an ordained interfaith minister. And it wasn't until about 2018 that I first started sitting with mushrooms. And it was through that experience, sort of very similar to the language that you use, Christina, that I felt this sort of bridge to God and Spirit. And that really propelled me forward into attending a 2-year chaplaincy program. And during my time there, I really felt this call to be sort of an apprenticeship to the mushroom. So I sort of, at the time, dissolved my business. I started working for North Spore at like minimum wage, just doing the labor of love for mushrooms. And I then started growing my own mushrooms and sending out microdose teas to people free of charge. I still do that to this day. But with this idea of growing mushrooms and giving people access, no questions asked and no exchange. And that's been a very important part of my practice with mushrooms, is realizing that I can never personally charge for the mushroom. So fast forward to 2021, I sort of very unexpectedly got pregnant and sort of put things on hold for a while I went through pregnancy and giving birth and postpartum. And I'm sort of just now emerging out of that, and have some very concrete ideas for how I want to move forward with my practice. And it's under the purview of something called the Grow, Gather, Give Project. And I'm really interested in working at the intersection of psychedelics, death, and grief. I'm a trained grief ritualist, and am hoping to get to more deaf doula work as well. But when I think about churches, I bristle, which is funny because I'm a minister. I don't call myself a minister. I don't really resonate with that term either. Chaplain is really the only thing that feels right for me. But I think part of it is growing up in Texas, having some religious trauma, very devout evangelical relatives. And just some of the terminology that I feel in my body that I can logically accept, like church or sacrament, but in my body I constrict. And so it's interesting to me that I very much support the idea of these mushroom churches, but for me, it's not the right answer. And I think too, it could be my upbringing as a Quaker, where we didn't go to church, we went to meeting. And we were with friends. That's what Quakers call themselves. There is no minister. There's no hierarchy. People are sitting together in silence for an hour and speaking from their heart, whatever is on their mind that they want to share to the congregation. And so I think that that's part of where this resistance in me comes from, as much as I also support all of these efforts of community building too, which is really what this is at its core. So some interesting questions that have come up for me around churches specifically in Maine is that, Maine is one of the most unchurched states in the US. And it's been that way for many, many centuries, really. It goes back to agricultural times when the South had mostly crop industry, and so people could leave on Sunday to go to church. Whereas up here in Maine, it was a lot of dairy and cattle, and so folks could not leave to go to church. They had to tend to the animals. So it's deeply entrenched. It's different, of course, now than it was then. But this question of, what are some of the challenges in setting up churches in one of the most unchurched states in the country? And as an interfaith chaplain, what I've come up against is people who, like myself, really struggle with language, the language of church, the language of sort of sacrament and holy, because of their religious trauma. And so I'm curious about how do we set up churches and be mindful of language so that we can include more people. And I also recognize that this is a reclamation process too, right? Of reclaiming these words and having a different meaning. So I understand the importance of that as well. Yeah, I'm just interested in those questions, but that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I said my name already, right? Yeah, I'm Courtney. Hey, I can relate to something from what each one of you has shared, so thank you for going first to prime my pump. And yeah, that's me reflecting on like what parts of my journey so far into Mushroom Church do I want to share with the time. What was coming up for me, Sandy, when you were sharing, was some of the best experiences I had in my youth. Going to church was with friends to their churches and feeling just the difference in different church styles. The churches that my parents, my mom took me to, and her side of the family, and my dad's side of the family churches, like they were all so different. So I got an opportunity as a kid to see the difference and also feel a lot of confusion around like the dissonance happening on the stage and then also within the actual community of people coming together on a regular basis. So really valuing those parts in the community and like the youth group experience, but really struggling with what was being, the message being delivered on Sundays. So I distanced myself from church completely, like once I had autonomy as an adult. And consciousness to me was like a major turn off. I was not interested in that at all. I thought it would just make my life worse, essentially. So, kind of a funny story I thought might be interesting to share. In my journey in working with cannabis, and also at that time coming in Terrence McKenna, and a lot of Terrence McKenna just kind of popped into my field. All of a sudden, I was managing a health food store, so I was also being introduced to spirituality through food and learning about environment and like how food is grown for the first time. These concepts of like all things live in us, like we live in all things through the health food store. And so coming into my spirituality that way, but a story I thought would be funny to share is my weed guy at the time. So he called me up one day and he was like, "Hey, Courtney, I got a really good deal on some really good funky stuff." And because we spoke in code. And I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." He told me the price. And I was like, "That is a really good price for that much weed." And he was like, "Oh yeah, it's a good deal." We were speaking in code, mind you. So anyway, he drives an hour to get to me and shows up and hands me a bag of mushrooms. And I'm like, "What's this?" And he's like, it's the fungi. And I was like, "Fungi? I thought you said funky." I said fungi. I'm like, "This is a giant bag of mushrooms. I've never eaten mushrooms before. I don't want these." And he was like, "Well, I drove an hour, so you have to take them." I'm like, "Shit." So I'm like, "All right, here's some money. I'm taking these mushrooms. What?" So I just kind of like stashed them away for a while, but I was interested. Like I felt a resonance, and I kind of like I recognized the message, like the synchronicity, listening to all the Terrence McKenna and being interested in having an experience with the mushroom, but just having nobody, like no community around it. So I was just afraid. So my first experience was with the mushroom was due to my roommate at the time giving me a really hard time about letting mushrooms sit in the freezer. She was like, "Really? Like, come on, have some fun, Courtney." She was my fun roommate. I was like the serious one. And she's like, "Let's just eat these mushrooms." So my first experience was very eye-opening. There wasn't any intention around it. We were in our apartment in the middle of winter time, and it was very uncomfortable and very confusing. And I thought, why is Terrence McKenna so obsessed with mushrooms? Like, this is horrible, actually. I experienced this like really weird, like, okay, here I am for the first time having this experience, and I'm also holding space for my roommate and her friend, but I don't know how to do this. And it was just really, really eye-opening in that way. So, long story short, the interesting part of this story is down the road, I met Eric at his gourmet mushroom farm. And I won't go into that story, but I was telling him about my first mushroom experience. And the guy, because we lived in the same area, and the guy that sold me the fungi. And he goes, "Those were my mushrooms." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" He's like, "Yeah, like I'm the one that supplied that man." Always. So I not only was like the mushroom came to me, but like also like our marriage and partnership and with the mushroom was also like just kind of showed up in my life. And that's kind of what's happened with Psanctuary. And it's just been this like really organic, like lots of synchronicities and messages from community and myself that I want to build relationships authentically with each other. And I've seen the mushroom help that facilitate that process within myself and with other people hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. So I was very resistant to the church idea. I say this all the time to our community members. The church was not my idea. It was Athena and Eric's idea, and I wanted to have nothing to do with it because not because I wasn't interested in community and the mushroom, but because of the stigma. And I thought, how in the world, living in Kentucky in the Bible Belt, are we not going to have picketers in our yard? Furthermore, religious trauma. I want to invite people into community. I don't want to repel them because we need to figure out a way to communicate to our government system, who we are through common terminology. But with the unfolding, I just kept getting synchronicities. No, there is a way. Maybe there is another way. This isn't, maybe there's some outside the box thinking and feeling into this process. So, here we are with Psanctuary. Where are we going with Psanctuary? This evolves every month. Our community, we are striving, and Eric will have so much to add to what I'm saying, but we're striving to be more of a decentralized model as opposed to a hierarchical model. There are so many challenges with that we're working through and will be working through for a long time, I'm sure. But we're learning through that process that our members and our ministers have not just something to add, but everything to add. People are stepping up all the time with their unique gifts, like what Yeshua is doing, and Elena and Melanie here in Maine. It has a very fundamental, we're following best practices together, and we have our bylaws and our operational guidelines that we're working on. We've been working on for a long time, evolving. But the culture here is different, and Yeshua and Melanie's processes are different than what's happening in Kentucky. And that's such a beautiful thing because we can learn from each other, and it is so much more beautiful than any ideas that just me, Athena, and Eric and our board at Psanctuary can come up with alone. So what I see though, my vision is a space for families. We have 2 kids, 2 young children together. So having a really great space for families to come together is becoming increasingly important to us. Having an end of life process that feels welcoming is really important to us. That's a ministry that we're developing with Debbie Pierce and Jason Eftink in Psanctuary, and so much more. I don't know, I'll let Eric expound on that. There's just so much in the future for our community, but challenges. So many challenges, so many rewarding challenges, but that's the thing as well, is working through the challenges. There's so much bliss in that experience, between the growth points, and having these conversations together with our community has been so freaking cool. All the ideas that other people come up with, the challenges are solved always. There's always a solution, which has been amazing to watch unfold. But one of which, accessibility. Christina, you touched on this with charging and that whole element. We want our people, all of our people, to have a comfortable and safe life and be supported financially. And also, we want our community to have access to sacrament and spaces that feel welcoming and supported and nourishing. So how do we structure this so we can have both? That's something that we've been working through. And let's see, what else? Governance is a big thing as we're growing. As we're growing and having different locations pop up, we want to make sure that we are operating in alignment with each other. We're all on the same page. That Psanctuary Kentucky, Psanctuary Maine, Psanctuary Indiana, Ohio, Washington, all the locations that we have popping up, we want to make sure, like, okay, like, where are we? Like, what if someone wants to leave at the end of a ceremony? And what if one person feels like they're ready to drive off and another person doesn't? And like all those little things that come up in ceremony, and like we just want to make sure we're on the same page. Like, how do we get on the same page with our training protocols, our best practices, and really feel good about that? And one more challenge, which is equally as exciting, is collaboration with other churches. So this is something very different for us than what we did when we were in the retreat world in Jamaica for profit. There was a lot of competition energy and very little like, how can we collaborate energy with each other? So like collaborating with you all is so important to us because we need each other right now with the legal climate. So yeah, that's all I'll say. Thank you all.
Yeah, so I was raised Catholic, super traumatized by all of that. When I first smoked cannabis, I was like, oh, they lied to me about everything. And so I am, I've just always been a fan of altered states. And as I started to study kind of spirituality outside of the Catholic box and even within the Catholic organized box, find out that altered states are kind of intrinsic to the religious experience. So that's just kind of like, I feel like it's helpful for me. Like I did not come from the straight laced. I like to get kind of bent and found out that it was actually really valuable to me. You know, when I was just taking psychedelics for fun, I always thought like, I'm actually learning something here. I'm growing, but they're telling me this is wrong or bad for me. So in like 20 years, like 99 was when I first started taking mushrooms. In 2014, I actually started a psilocybin church, or was in the process of starting a psilocybin church. It was actually 2015, shortly before Courtney and I were reported and arrested for psilocybin, so I didn't have religious protection. And then, yeah, we went into Jamaica and kind of went into the for-profit world, which was really like, even in when I was doing underground work, I never would charge for it. And in Jamaica, it just did not sit well with me charging $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. When I started the retreats, I was actually like, I was smuggling mushrooms to Jamaica and you know, doing it like that until I could get a grow going down there. And I was charging $1,000 for a 10-day retreat, everything included except for airfare, completely running it into the ground financially. And so the challenge that I have, the biggest challenge that I've experienced with the church concept around psilocybin is attaching money to it. And now that we are kind of starting to explore this diversified ministership where, you know, it's Elena and Athena and everybody's here, Randy, Matt, all the people like becoming their own ministers, supporting each other, but then still needing to find a way to support the community financially. It takes hell of money to run things, you know? And we want to have big, beautiful buildings where people can come and gather, or big properties where people can do their thing and safely and securely. Like, all that's going to take money. So that's like the biggest problem for me is like, I don't have a great relationship with the concept of wealth, you know? But I want to for our community so that we can create something that is really long lasting, something that really provides incredible service to people, and that we can hopefully at some point just completely detach money from the sacrament. That's really a big goal of mine, and trying to figure out how to do that while people are still being paid for their hard work. You know, Yeshua's working tirelessly here, as well as Elena and Melanie. So we got to fund that. That's the biggest challenge that I see with Psanctuary right now. And then the governance, like, you know, it's very easy for us in the psychedelic bubble. We talk about this a lot, how it's like, oh, everybody takes mushrooms. Everybody's cool with mushrooms, right? That is not the case at all. the churches, I think, in particular, I'm a little nervous about the kind of, even though I'm very much a free-form person, I'm a little nervous about the psychedelic churches and the free-formness that we're seeing out there because, the IRS and the DEA, there are standards as to what a church is supposed to look like and is supposed to do. And the vast majority of psychedelic churches out there are not following those standards. So I have a concern that at some point there's going to be a sweep. And so what Psanctuary has really hoped to do, and like, it wasn't actually Athena and my idea, it was our attorney. When Courtney and I sold our shares from Myco, the retreat that we owned down there, our attorney at the time, who was a very experienced psychedelic attorney, said, Eric, like, you're the most sincere spiritual practitioner of mushrooms I've ever met. And if anybody could create an organization that could stand up to the Supreme Court, I think it's you. And I want to help you do that. And I was like, fuck that. I'm sorry, kid. Sorry. I cuss around my kids too. So. Anyway, I was like, no. And he's like, all right, we'll sit with it. And so, I love this work. I've never seen anything that can transform lives like mushrooms, period. Or LSD or ayahuasca or MDMA. Anyway. And so eventually I was like, this is the way, honestly. And it was really going back to my roots because we tried to start a church in 2015. And so he helped us set us up with the intention of creating an organization that could kind of be a flagship for people around the country who wanted to join a legitimate church that was well structured, that was well organized, completely unlike its founding minister, but that would be a protection for people that could come into this community, feel safe in their practice, learn how to work with mushrooms better, how to work together as a community. I've always been very much a community builder. And so there are so many challenges with this work. I think there are I don't know, like the for-profit world we were involved in was, in a foreign country, but we still had quite a few issues. We had bank accounts shut down. And I was very often nervous about flying back into the States. But there are a whole different set of challenges that I love working through with amazing people. It's really like, I love figuring out the stuff. And this is something that I feel like could not only set a really powerful precedent, but can help drastically shift the culture around religion and psychedelics. Psychedelics are, thankfully, they're being researched, they're being applied therapeutically. But if we're going to really respect and honor the wisdom of our indigenous ancestors, like the therapy, the mental health benefits are secondary. It's your spiritual growth. It's your spiritual progress that all of those fruits are born from. So to create an organization that really puts that out at the front and provides protection for people and community, all that stuff, it's great fun. It's a great challenge that I'm very much enjoying.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, everybody. Good job.
Oh, you guys heading out?
Yeah,
Okay.
hopefully you should.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
All right. We still have on the clock another 30 minutes. If you want to stay with us and then lunch. For those that want to stay, you're welcome to stay longer. Since it's lunch, we'll just hang out in here for who wants to stay and continue to talk. We have a lounges there as well over there, so if anyone does want to go, we can go and hang out with our peeps at the expo booth. Go talk more about what's going on. We got a dance party here tonight, 5:30 to 7. So I'll have to have you here. So what came up? My invitation is let's hear from you about what were some maybe impulses of your heart or your curiosity or your consciousness around what was shared, and maybe what patterns emerged. What were there like some commonalities around here that we're all maybe need to figure out, work out. Maybe even you're not going to be in the church leadership space, but it can help us think about it. What's coming up? What do we need to like work out here from what has been shared that you can participate in the conversation? So let's like open it to just hear you share, and then after those shares, then maybe we can be in dialogue back and forth together. So let's maybe try to keep these shares to around a minute or two or under where we started, and it was anything from like 6 to 12 minutes. So with a limited time, just keep them concise, brief, please. Matthew.
So I'm an attorney. I'm not a First Amendment or a constitutional law attorney, but I've been looking into the legality of, establishing a sacrament-based church. And my challenge to you folks, different church leaders here, is to work on a theology of psychedelics based on your experience and what you have. I know Terence McKenna started working on this stuff, but it would be very useful to have a body of work that people could refer to. And if we were challenged as, you're just a fake, you're a co-op that wants to get high. If we could point to work that our members, our co-religionists, our allies have done to develop a spiritual theology, not a dogma. I suppose that's a fine line, but we got to resist it. Of course, looking around here, I think we probably could, but you never know what comes later. But I would challenge you folks to think about that and work on it, and maybe at some point think about putting out some kind of collective document or something.
Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah.
Allegra.
So I'm a new member of the Psanctuary Church, and when I joined, it felt right to me. Like this is, and I have had experience with the Amazon plants, teacher plants. So in that respect, I wasn't, but no experience with mushrooms. I was surprised with the services because they seemed like, I grew up in New York and there was something that was called ethical culture, where God was never mentioned. It was like humanism. And I was surprised that Psanctuary did not have more of a conversation about the divine, because for me, that's the plants and my connection to the divine. And I learned that there are people in Sanctuary Church who have had bad experiences with religion. But here I am craving, like I am deeply in love with the earth. I want to express that. I really want to express that. And it's not available to me through the Sanctuary Church at this point, except a ceremony that I did with Yeshua, a group of us. And it was the most meaningful spiritual experience I've ever had. So on that level, like on the ground, among people, among a small community, totally works. At large, for me, totally doesn't work. So I'm just saying, like that exists, and that problem, to me, it looks like a problem that there is how to heal. I don't know what you do. You heal all the bad religious experiences that everybody's had, like that's crazy. So I'm just saying that I'm feeling the lack of the divine at the larger level.
Thank you, Allegra. Maybe one other person, and let's go to dialogue back and forth. Remind us your name again.
Jason.
Jason.
From Massachusetts. One of the things about church that I think is really important is locality. And when I think about community, I think about people that you
Same or similar sentiment expressed back. And there are so many members who have expressed real discomfort with the kind of traditional religious talk. um, I see divinity all around us. I see the Sunday service. I see when Johnny and Matt get on there, I see divinity there. When Courtney is sharing meditation, so while we have been very intentional about avoiding some traditional religious language, we can do better about bridging gaps for kind of different perspectives. But it's interesting, someone brought the word dogma in. And this is a challenge that the first night we came in, and they asked me to do a blessing for the dinner. And I just almost refused because I can't speak to your experience for divinity, which is why we invite our membership to speak to their experience for divinity. And so how to create a collective of people who have very disparate perspectives on this mystery that none of us can really explain, right? And to share that in a way that is not only not alienating, but really inviting and inclusive. So we've tried to create, language and a service and context and container that is as open to as many people as possible. But it's been interesting to note that our church has, if there is anyone who feels kind of not at place in the church, it's those who are more comfortable with kind of traditional expressions of divinity or God or relationship with this big mystery. So, I guess what I would love to invite, open up to you and anybody else that's a part of our community or whatever faith community or whatever community you're a part of, speak up, share your voice, because your voice is the divine. And when Alan, for instance, is a member who is a therapist, a very Christian therapist, and he speaks to this on Sunday service, I just don't hear anybody talking about the thing that I want to hear, right? And I celebrate that. I know we do. Because that's what my hope is we are moving towards, is a more humanitarian perspective where all perspectives, all peace-loving, unity-focused perspectives are welcomed and celebrated. So, in part, I'll leave it at this, at least from my standpoint, and again, I can't speak for Courtney or Athena or the other board or Elena or Yeshua, but my perspective on this kind of aspect of our community is make your voice heard more, because there are people within Sanctuary who resonate with what you're saying. And we've actually had a group starting now that's called Christ as a Container, because there are devout Christians in Sanctuary who are like, I really want to talk about Jesus and how it relates to my mushroom experience. And I love that. I want that. I also want the Buddhist guy and the pagan and whoever else to be able to kind of contextualize their relationship in a comfortable way. So that's what came up for me. Thanks for sharing that very much.
I have a close friend who is an interfaith minister trained by Chime in Maine. She can say anything, and it's not offensive to anybody. There is a way. There is a way.
Well, I can certainly get better at not offending people. That's for sure.
I was also trained by Chime.
I knew it.
Yes. And what I sort of remember in creating services for people is that we would have these very active conversations about language when we collaborated on services, and just saying okay, we're going to replace the word in this poem because we know that it can be activating for people. And I think also too, creating conversation with people who are in the service, and maybe even allowing there to be an acknowledgement, like, we're going to be reading this poem and there's this word, and we want everyone to feel absolutely welcome to replace it with whatever word resonates for you the best, and then we offer some words. So I think even prayer can be very restricting for people. I know it was for myself because I only grew up with petitionary prayer, and then I realized that there was a lot of different forms of prayer. And so even offering that as a conversation to congregant members of, okay, we're using this word, but here's what we mean by it. And here's how you can make it your own, I think can be really helpful. But it is challenging because you don't know everybody's activation point. So how do you possibly hold a service without having anybody be activated? It can't happen. But if there are openings for conversations and invitations like you just gave, I think that is the key to creating that sense of belonging in those services.
Yeah, I mean, 90 minutes of our service anyway is open to community discussion.
Yeah.
So that's the opportunity that we hope to provide people to bring in whatever their perspective is. And I know, like, again, it can be challenging. I should shut up. I can talk. It's my son.
No, it's okay.
Thank you for your voice. One final comment on that, Allegra, maybe let's shift to one of the other two, one of the sponsors. And it's a learning process. We're figuring it out together. One way in setting the container that we're exploring in Maine is bringing in prayer more in our group ceremony. And that's been an evolving process just the last 6 months, every month, about how do we make space to honor our own practice and to be in communion with the divine, with each of our practices, and honor each other in that process and learn from each other, and to practice supporting and amplifying and maybe sharing our hearts, and maybe bringing about more of that prayer in our own way through our own practice. So, like having a couple months ago, we had some Muslims that were there and praying to Muhammad and their practice, and often some Christians or esoteric side, some pagans. And the prayer is somewhat of a kind of a unifying place to explore, but there's probably also other containers to explore how we can deepen that communion and being in introspection and contemplation together in Sunday service or outside is another, and maybe making space on our own in our own practice. What is that? How do you deepen in communion with nature? Then maybe bring that as an invitation to the group. We wish for more events for us all to step into our leadership, and so to do, like, microdosing membership hike is certainly been on the intents to be out there, yet to happen, but it's intended to happen soon. And the various other activities that we can have. We've talked about kayaking at the awesome oyster spots, one of our members. And the more we can all step into like what we really love and want to do for our own communion and invite others that resonate with that, participate. I find in sitting in the mushroom space a bit that discovering that I'm enough and discovering my agency, and then bringing that agency to community and have community reflect back like, yes, thank you. Like, thank you, you are beautiful, thank you. And the more we're in that give and receive and weaving together is where community is actually happening. Not just like, a few of us saying, this is what we're doing, but what we're all doing together. So please, Allegra, for you, and may you be an example, all of us, ask yourself, where's my agency? Maybe even where's my responsibility? Where is the potential that I'm called towards within my heart? Or maybe even I see the pain of community that I feel suffering about. Where's the potential that exists out there that I want to see? And if it's not happening, then what's my role in that? And want to weave that into like the localized part. One community I've been part of building for some time, this group called Regenerative Practitioner Network. There's thousands of us globally the Bay Area. We have where I've been the last decade, have a good number of us, and that group has grown internationally. And we are coming together to work on our self-kin locale to focus on where are those pains and like one way that we're finding where's the pain of my community and where's the potential. There's more ways to look at it, but that's one way. And then what is within myself? How can I work on myself to play a role in that community? And that would be one framework, one possibility of kind of weaving the web between what is the church and how do we relate to what's local. I'll put context in answer to that. Sanctuary Maine is just a name of little less than 100 members as of now. Maybe from the beginning it's over that something. But that's spanning a pretty long distance from Matthew, that's at Easton, way up north, right on the border of Canada, down to here, me in Portland, and even us, south. That's like hundreds and hundreds of miles, even though we find a way to come together periodically. That's not really locale. It's just a name of Maine, a state, that we kind of are organizing under. In Portland, where I just landed here a week ago, and so I'm like, where's my freaking people? Like, where's people here? Well, we can break bread every weekend, We're just call you up and come over now. I broke my leg, or someone's mom fell down, or whatever. I'm gonna be there. How do we find more of that and still? And that's back to agency too. Again, I think that there's this emergence now, just like in Maine, under the body of Psanctuary, but and as we all step into our calling in our place and invite our friends and our family and that broader community to come around us, that's when we are stepping into our role of leadership. And that might be just 4 people around the dinner table, but that's a friggin' community. It's happening. Versus waiting for someone else to organize and make it happen. And that's ministry. Think of what the hell is ministry? I mean, is it an ordained thing that some God comes down and says, you are blessed, you are ordained now, or some, body like Chime or Sanctuary or another person? I could tell you right now, you're all ministers. You can be a minister. You may already be so. Just to really own it and live it. And maybe there's some training and cultivation that we can all do to keep deepening in that practice, depending upon where your own integrity is. So if anyone wants to talk about locale, I'll get a couple words from my end. How do we think about locale and build local communities?
So actually, I would like to just go into local community for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is both about community and the law. When we started Sacred Earth Sanctuary, I was definitely going to put us out there. I didn't want to hold us back at all. There's this general fear about the law and that we need to be underground. And I said, no, I'm going to walk into the police station with all of my information, our statement of beliefs, our bylaws, our registration as a 508c1a. And I'm going to sit down and I'm going to tell them about me and what I do and why I do it. And it was very scary. It was not very well. But it went great. And they shook my hand and told me that some of their guys could use to sit in these ceremonies because of all the trauma of being in the force. And so I had that meeting. We also joined the Chamber of Commerce in town. And we had our flyers in with all the local businesses, and we went to all of the meetings. I sat down with the mayor. I had a conversation with her. She said, I'm not going, but I support you. And so my point is it's now we're in a very small, and we just moved to Salisbury, so now we're working in Salisbury. Amesbury was very welcoming to us because I said, we are here. We have good intentions. We're working from our heart. We're in our integrity, and they welcomed us in. So there is that hope there. If you walk in there with that confidence and that conviction and your truth, and they're going to love you, this is expanding. This is growing. That fear is starting to go away. And as we move through our community, more and more people are coming in and accepting it. And we're just out there. We're out there. There's no fear at all. Here we are. This is what we're doing. So I just wanted to give you that little bit of hope. And when you're out there like that, real community does start to build, because then the locals in town are very curious. And for them, it's very foreign. But they're like, oh, you're having an event? Well, maybe I'd like to come and just dip a toe in and learn a little bit. And so I have faith that our community really will start to expand where we're centralized because of just being out there. Yes.
But are you open? You were telling me you go to the police station and say, I am a church that uses psilocybin mushrooms as sacrament, and we provide them to our parishioners. And they say welcome to the community.
Yes.
I can tell you, if I went to the Maine State Police Barracks in Holton and said, I opened a mushroom church in Easton, we have ceremonies and we're taking psilocybin mushrooms, they would serve a search warrant on me the next day and I would be in jail. So I'm just telling you that.
Are you certain of that, though?
I am 99.9%
Well,
positive.
that 1% is where I would walk in there anyway.
Well, okay.
It's really important to know your audience and these kinds of things. There are certainly communities, and like Alabama, it'd be hard to walk into a news station in Alabama or Kentucky. I mean, I love and respect what you did. I think it's incredible, and there needs to be more of that. And at the same time, I don't want to push anybody into that place, which, is kind of like, again, what my original hope with Sanctuary was that, like, somebody like Matt can have that kind of that protection and that community in the pocket, and somebody like me can get out there and say, hey, send the cops my way if you need to send them somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, I love that you're doing that. I actually want us to join the Chamber of Commerce. Now that you mentioned that's like a great idea.
Mm-hmm.
But also, like, just understanding that, like, not everybody is there and not everybody is able to, pray to God. And it's so, like, psychedelics, like I saw this in Jamaica, it's amazing. The diversity of people that come to psychedelics is unlike anything else. That's wonderful. And it also creates some real challenges in kind of cohesiveness and communication. Everybody feeling like they have a place at the table.
But if you are set up, like you are a church, you have your Bible, you have all of your ducks lined up, you are in your integrity, you have your faith, you are a church.
The Soul
What
Quest is
right do they have?
So how much has Soul Quest spent on defending their church in the last year?
Nice.
Or how much, like, just because you're an organized church doesn't mean you aren't going to have significant legal challenges and expenses, right? So I totally get it. We have had many sleepless nights because of Sanctuary, because we are wide effing open, and, like, I do feel like at some point we're going to have to, to defend ourselves, and that's going to cost money. It's going to need people that rally, and so, like, this is where I kind of mentioned this in my little intro. I have a concern that these psychedelic churches, and there are hundreds, there's like 200 something psychedelic churches in the U.S. right now.
And when I asked Allison Hoots about it, she says, ultimately we don't know because most of them are underground, but she says probably thousands. Yeah. What's above, what's kind of known, and those that are putting themselves out there.
Either way, like Detroit, there was a church in Detroit that was like, literally they had placards up that says, we got shrooms and we'll deliver, and they're a church, right? So, like, just because I think we're good actors, doesn't mean that everybody else is, and it does mean, like, or actually I think that means that there will eventually come this kind of backlash that hopefully legitimate churches will be able to stand up against and prove them out.
Okay. This is a constant conversation in my home because we have our stuff, we have all of our ducks in a row, and this is, for me personally, it's like the swing back and forth because I agree. We're located on Main Street in our little town where we are. And we are part of the community, and we do a lot of, like, non-mushroom stuff, and people come, and it's great. And so for me personally, the constant back and forth and the conversation in my home is, I personally feel like I have to live in my absolute truth. Sorry, that the mushrooms are as sacred as I know them to be. And so with that comes full transparency, because if not, if the police or the government were to look at me and I am not fully transparent and own the sacredness of my service, I feel like that creates the door and the foothold for them to be like, you're actually full of shit, because these are the things that you're hiding. These are the things that you are not owning. And then also, I'm like, oh, I have kids in this school district. Are my children going to be taken from me? Just like, very devout people who don't agree with me, like what comes in social media form, as far as like harassment and stuff like that. But I always come back, and my husband's an immigrant on a green card, so there's like a whole other weight. And yet, I think, no, I have to honor that. And walk in my truth and know that if they see the authenticity of my work, that in itself, at least, I'm hoping and praying that that will provide an enough of an assurance that I am doing the best that I can to I don't know, to create the protection, I guess, in the authenticity. But it's hard to it's hard to know what to do by. So I'm when I heard that, I was very grateful. Because I think, I do think that's the way. And whatever comes from it is gonna have to come from it. But to own it from the get-go, I think provides some protection and she's not just delivering shrooms, there's something real here with this person who's willing to show up and be like, look at me, look, I love that. So I want to take that home with us.
I miss what was just said, but I'm very conflicted there also, because I am a mom.
Yeah.
My position, in a way, is that what we do within our community, though, is so private and sacred that it's kind of none of their business. And so we are polysacrament at our church. And so the way that my bylaws are articulated is to say that we, to honor Mother Earth, reserve the right to grow, forage, and, ask permission, from the herbs and from the community to then co-create with our creator to make medicine for one another, for which we reserve the right to share. Similar to that of a Native American church. And we reserve the right to engage in ceremonies that are similar to the Native American church. And I use those words because a precedent that has been set in the past by other cases, right? Mm-hmm. I am not Native American. I am Native European. I feel as though mushrooms and entheogenic medicine, all beings, deer, bears, they eat mushrooms too. So nobody can claim the right to them. All beings, when they come to you, it's your time. You found them, right? I happened to be 15 at a Grateful Dead show. I was particularly suicidal. I had been sexually assaulted. I was in a really dark place. And I was very lucky that my parents, who also grew cannabis next to the tomato plants, were permissioning me to go to this Highgate, Vermont. So this 2015 will be my 29th year anniversary of since I ever tried LSD 25. And that changed my life. I realized that everything that I was really concerned and worried about actually didn't matter. And I actually was reminded who I am and why I'm here on earth and what my mission is, and that I was okay, I was good, I was allowed, I could be a sexual person again, and that my sexuality was part of the divine, and I forgave myself, and I healed from a lot of guilt and shame because of these psychedelic medicines. And so I'm a 29-year veteran at this point. I took 15 years off. So as I wrote my bylaws, I take the position that it's actually not really any of the government's business, what we do in ceremony or what I do in my own personal practice, because what they just need to mostly know is that I reserve the right to my consciousness, and I reserve the right to respect, my relationship with plants and use plants to make medicine than we do for each other. So I never have more sacrament in my space than for which our members would potentially need for about 2 months. And so how I also do no harm is I'm the president, and Stanley is the founder across from me of another 501c3 that is called Green Network Providers. So when people find me, my job is to meet them where they're at. Part of that is to take the responsibility if they are in the medical system and they are on pharmaceuticals or they have certain diagnoses, to shepherd them into a position or a situation with a nurse practitioner that is way more qualified than me to discuss what the combination of psychedelics and their pharmaceuticals, what that's going to look like for them. Because I am not a doctor, I am not a nurse, nor do I ever want to be. However, I have a system of checks and balances where my clients go to Green Network Providers where the nurse practitioners use the medicine they have for decades. Then they also have the medical training. They can inform people, do you want to taper? What does that look like? You want to get off these pharmaceuticals? You think that psychedelics are going to get you off your pharmaceuticals? Well, let's look at your pharmaceuticals, which is sometimes a list of 12 things, right? So I, as a human, in order to do no harm, I meet the person where they're at, and then I put them in a flow with qualified healthcare practitioners who are also very spiritual people. Then they come back to church for integration or preparation and education. Say they want to go to Jamaica. They come to us to, you know what I mean? So there's so many different types of humans that are interested in using these molecules or mushrooms, whatever you want to call it. And they're coming from so many different backgrounds and perspectives. And so my position is safety and transparency within our group. But as far as government goes, I'm a good neighbor. I donate to the police association, but they don't need to know what happens behind closed doors. As far as I'm concerned, it's my business and not theirs. And that's the nature of, do you guys know what the Freemasons do? Do you guys know what they have their things and they do it, and it's none of our business. And I'm too busy minding my own business to care. And that's the point, I think, of America, right? This is supposed to be what we have left, is freedom of religion. So again, what we do is none of their business, in my opinion. So my ceremonies, they're evolving. They change every day because the seasons change, my condition changes, the times change, everything's changing. So, I don't think it's their business, although transparency is to a certain point expected. But I'm only going to say so much,
Yeah, I'm not saying that way.
Yeah.
It's more just what is, how do we walk this path? And also, be in community. We have nothing ceremonies, but I just want to be a part of our community. And even for education purposes, my teens are older, they're, I sat in ceremony with them,
That was my
just it's just education for them. How do they safely explore this stuff? And to be a part of the community. I like where we live, and I want to be there for a long time. And it's how do you do this? How do you do it and sleep at night? Yeah.
I'm going to share what did you want to speak in? Are you ready?
I just wanted to offer a reflection that I see sort of these mushroom churches and the formation of them as a form of psychedelic activism, and just wanting to reflect that there are a lot of different forms of activism. There's very, very loud, out in public space activism, and then there are people who work behind closed doors who are contributing to that movement as well. And so I just appreciate sort of the diversity of perspectives on how to engage in that space. And I think that need merit and value.
And I think that's important because the diversity is so important because every community is different. And I don't learn from everybody or share. And so
We should start a support group.
yeah.
One very short reflection. One thing I'm noticing, first of all, is major gratitude for having these conversations together and amidst a whole variety of folk to just reflect and witness the activism and just the process. That's feeling really huge for me right now because I have these conversations every single day at home, on Zoom, amongst board and other members, and so it feels really good to expand and feel supported in that. So another thing, government saying we need your permission to operate, and that gave the DEA then permission to investigate and warrant them. So just like an interesting notable, it's one reason we have not and will not apply to the DEA because we don't need their permission. They're not like actually equipped at all to determine if we're a church or not legitimately. All the while, major respect for what you did. I'm like putting myself in your shoes, like imagining myself doing that and feeling really like uplifted, imagining it going really well. So thanks for that inspiration. That's all I wanted to share.
I mean, I meet my local police officer at the dive bar, and he's well aware, seriously, I'm not kidding, of what my work is about and what I do. I also work with firefighters in Dorchester and Quincy, and they're my brother-in-laws, and like, I'm pretty sure that the police chiefs and the firefighter that they're happier that they're not coming in with hangovers, right? So this is, I think, why they kind of leave me alone and allow us to exist. And I mean, we do have children at our church services. There's a DJ in the front. We have thanks to Stanley, a very appropriate Harry Potter style, secret door that leads to a passageway in the back where we safely consume cannabis is one of our sacraments. And again, my parents smoked weed in the next room too, and I turned out okay. I think a lot of this is we gotta chill out and normalize it. And so there's a bar on every corner, and there's candy visible, and they're inviting children in. So I'm going to have children in my location where I have CBD and a store in the front, and I have a DJ and I have a space in the back with video games. For them to have something to do if I have to bring my kids to work. Can't afford a babysitter every Saturday. So then in the back where we partake in the sacrament of cannabis at our Soul Saturday services, we're a private club. We register as a private club. And when I asked, well, what about if I wanted to give alcohol away at a service? And he says, this was during the pandemic, mind you, so we all had masks. And, Stan and I do very well at dressing in black and just, being, I would say, what's the word? Just real. So I said, what about alcohol? He said, but I need a permit. He said, ma'am, you can do anything here that you can do in your own home. And I said, really? And I thought to myself, but I did not say it out loud. You know what I do? I smoke cannabis in my house. I didn't do it in the same room as my kids, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a separate area. We have filters. We have a HEPA filter, carbon filter, a continuous infectious microbial reduction system because I opened during the pandemic to keep us safe. So again, my job is to create the safe and sacred spaces where people can come and express and ask questions and be educated on plant medicine. A lot of our members grow. A lot of our members make medicine out of mushrooms. We come together, we share, we talk. Mm-hmm. That's what I do in my own home. Mm-hmm. So a private club is what I have established with the town because we're in the zone for a church and a private club. So they're like, well, is this a church or is this a private club? I said, it's a private club for the members of my church. I said, okay. So again, you have to read the room, you have to know who you're dealing with. I've dealt with the town of Rockland, similar response. I mean, people, again, we're not selling fentanyl. We're keeping people off of opiates. We're helping, we're providing community services, we're holding space, we're doing free breath in. I think that they see us as part of the solution of the problem. So far, so good. But again, they don't need to know the nitty gritty details of everything that we do. But we've been transparent as possible as to say, this is the rules, this is the zone, this is what we're doing. Is it cool? Let's talk about the noise ordinance because that's more important to them half the time than anything else because they just don't want people complaining about stuff. So you just have to talk to people, be a politician.
We actually have a more difficult time selling healthy snacks.
We had a difficult time selling
Board
safety
of
gummies. Because of the Board of Health, yeah.
I'm going to share a little bit about what's going on in Psanctuary, Maine here, and then allow us to maybe close in less than 5 minutes or so. If you want to stay after and continue, we're here, around. So currently Psanctuary, Maine is homeless. And when people say, where's your place?
Oh, no.
It's that lounge that's out there. I used to have that settled at another member's home in their residence in Belfast, and that was the place to keep it separate from my living quarters at another location. Then also we don't keep sacrament on site, we keep it at another member's home. So me as the predominant space holder, minister in our community, having the minister not having sacrament at home at one place and then having a separate space has been a way to keep a little bit more of the separation and ability to probably defend that I'm not a drug dealer, just handing out. I don't also hand anything out. It's always with me with a larger blanket of being able to support others through a series of 8 different touch points, including the ceremony. So it's a ceremony on a mostly a full day, 8 to 10 hours or so, plus all these this other time together. So then there's other ministers that do some of that work. I do it full time. The group work is only once a month, and we now have like a traveling circus, or tents moving around. We just set up, and it's like a whole endeavor to have the U-Haul and volunteers bringing it together and set up.
Street tour.
Yes, that's right. We need a trailer and we need a storage unit now. I mean, we have my storage unit, but we need we're learning how to have these things separate from like Yeshua's life, from the church, and we're figuring that out too. Like financially, full transparency, it's an LLC because I've had an LLC for my business. It's better to have it separate from my personal life. The church itself has things separate. We're transitioning that. So like we are in the midst of like, what the hell is Psanctuary Maine outside of being Sanctuary? The same thing outside of financially, legality. How does that all happen? In Maine, the idea of a 508 in Maine, I've chosen not to file because I want to do it as it's emerging from Maine through the demand of feeling it's the right thing. I had the inkling of doing it a very long time ago, years ago before I came to Maine. But when I arrived here, I was like, how do we make a decision together collectively? And that was like, yeah, let's do the sanctuary thing. And then it's like, yeah, they got their thing, let's do it under them. And then now it's like, well, how do we do that right? And instead of like just jumping the gun and getting into it for a sense of like, oh, I'm safe and more secure, wanting to be part of this larger thing that's birthing. And it's as well made me feel more insecure and take more risk on due to the potential, law enforcement coming after. So I have a desire to show up to Portland Police Department and be more public. I want to have a store, or not a store, like a place where we're doing ceremony as a church, ideally a church, physical location, maybe one of these beautiful ones in
It's hard in
town.
a city, though.
What is that?
Villa mushrooms in a city. Oh, I find that to be extremely challenging because I grew up in Maine
Sure.
and I was tripping in the woods and the trees were turning purple and people freak out. I have a funny story because of my white privilege. Okay, you're not going to believe this. I was a freshman in college and I was on mushrooms and I was climbing a tree in the Boston Common. And the woman that was with me was here as a refugee. I mean, not as a refugee, I'm sorry. Her dad was a diplomat, thank God. Not as a refugee, that's a different friend. So my friend Andrea, her father was a diplomat. So she had this magical thing called diplomatic immunity, which I had never heard of because I grew up in Maine. I had never been anywhere. So freshman year, climbed a tree because I was in a city. And that's what I did when I tripped is I climbed trees. Well, Boston Police Department didn't think it was super cute that me and my girls were hanging out in the trees in a public park. This flashlight up. My pupils are the size of silver dollars, of course. And he's like, what are you ladies doing? Are you on drugs? You must be on drugs. Get down. And so I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get arrested for tripping on mushrooms in a tree in Boston. And I just remember her like shuffling around and she's like, all of a sudden she starts speaking Spanish because I think she has PTSD, thinking she's like back in another country. And all of a sudden she's like, and she presents this card. And the next thing you know, the officer just walks us right back up to the dorm and we're in the house and we're safe. But if we were black men or if I was like tripping in the city with, people who didn't look like me, like they would have been arrested and they would have been tripping while they got arrested. So there's a lot to do with privilege and like being in a city. It is not safe. I would never, ever, 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 ever do large medicine dose ceremonies where we are in a city in Weymouth Landing. We do microdosing only because it ain't safe. I'm sorry. There's too many factors that you cannot control in a city, and that's just my opinion. I don't know. People freak out.
I'm close here, Sandy.
People can get crazy.
I'm just going to add in there the role of a minister or a container holder is to partially, I would perceive myself not allowing someone to climb trees. That's.
Well, I obviously did not have a guide at that time.
I've guided people into trees on
Well, we're in a very
Not in the city.
we're in a very busy area where I am.
So to respect everyone's time that want to go and eat, I'm just going to close with if you have any ideas about how we can figure this out together, please be in more dialogue with us. We're trying to figure this out, and there's some pioneering work that's happening here. Please, I hope you feel the humility and the wish to learn with you. We certainly do not have the answers, but we are exploring the questions, and we're intending hopefully to work through more together. Hopefully we can be in conversation digitally as we're all kind of different places and working it out. And we invite you into this conversation. Maybe while we're here, and then outside, reach out to us individually if you feel like the impulse. Just like my invitation on agency, consider the same thing. If you have any sparks in your heart while at Fungi Fest, in this conversation, in this space or otherwise, how do you feel the flame and follow that post here? And if you see something in someone else through appreciation or some beauty, consider breathing life to that. Maybe that's like fueling the flame in them as well. That's an invitation as we continue our day here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you all.